Jeremiah 12, 1 through 17. Devotional focus verse. If thou hast run with the footmen, and they have wearied thee, then how canst thou contend with horses? And if in the land of peace, wherein thou trustedst, they wearied thee, then how wilt thou do in the swelling of Jordan? Jeremiah 12, 5. A few years ago, my friends and I decided to go whitewater rafting on a river that was new to us. We looked at a map and saw that there were 3 main big drops where the river changed elevation dramatically. I had a slight worry that I might be getting too old for such a thing, yet it sounded challenging and exciting. As I got into the raft with my friends, I felt a little nervous. We hit a few small runs and I began to relax a little. But I still felt dread for the challenging big water that was coming. We had packed lunches, and I asked that we not stop to eat until we had passed all 3 big drops so I could relax. After traveling for some time through small drops and falls, we hit our first big one. It was scary, but we made it, and that helped my confidence. When we made it through the second drop, I was feeling a bit more brave. Sometime later, we came to the 3rd big drop. What a relief it was when we got through it. Then we stopped for lunch, and I was set to enjoy the rest of the trip because the worst was behind us. As we sat on the bank eating our lunches, some men came by in kayaks, and we talked with them. Imagine my horror when I was informed that we had not even hit the first big drop yet. I thought things were as tough and scary as they would get, but I was wrong. However, going through those seemingly big drops actually prepared me for the huge ones that were to come. In today's text, Jeremiah was facing far more than whitewater rapids. He had people around him who wanted to take his life. Yet in the focus verse, Jeremiah was challenged by God. Even though the previous troubles he had faced had been hard, more difficult things were coming. Jeremiah was not to let the smaller challenges get him down. Instead, he was to meet them, and then he could face the bigger ones with confidence. In our Christian walks, we are going to have trials. We can either let those trials discourage us, or we can use them as faith-building experiences to make us stronger in the Lord. At times, we may be tempted to question God as Jeremiah did. Yet God knows what He is doing. When we don't understand why we have to go through a trial, we can rest assured that there is a bigger plan involved. We should remember that the trial of our faith will bring patience and endurance. It will make our faith stronger so we can be prepared for whatever is coming. We can be assured that all things do work together for our good, and that God has a perfect plan for our lives. We do not have to fear the future. Background information. Today's text concludes Jeremiah's 4th sermon. Shaken by the treacherous actions of his relatives and fellow citizens of Anathoth in their efforts to take his life, Jeremiah questioned God about why the wicked seemingly prospered in their evil doings. It appeared to him that God had planted the evildoers in Judah and allowed them to succeed and flourish when, even though they claimed to serve God, their hearts were far from Him. Jeremiah stated that God knew his heart and his desire to serve God, and he asked God to vindicate him by singling out those who were wicked, just as sheep were separated for slaughter. Jeremiah questioned why the land and animals had suffered his judgment for wrongdoing, rather than those who committed the transgressions. Beginning in verse 5, God's response focused on Jeremiah rather than the evildoers of Judah. God used 2 proverbs to make the analogy that if Jeremiah was overwhelmed by the smaller hardships, how could he withstand the intensifying adversity that was to come? God then warned Jeremiah against trusting his own family or neighbors in Anathoth, who had deceitfully caused many to turn against him. God told Jeremiah that he had been compelled to forsake his beloved people because of their rejection of him. God had claimed Judah for his heritage, but instead of obeying him, they had snarled at him like a roaring lion and had defiled the inheritance that God had given to them. Speckled birds with unusual markings were susceptible to attacks from other birds. Judah was as a speckled bird to the surrounding nations, and the rulers of these nations and their armies would devour Judah and its inhabitants. The land, which had been fruitful and bountiful, would become desolate and barren. In verse 14, God warned the Gentile nations that those who chose to harm God's inheritance, Judah, would also be plucked from their lands by their enemies. God then said that after he had removed them from their lands, he would benevolently give back their heritage if they would acknowledge that the God of Israel is the only true God and would serve him only. However, the nation that refused to obey God's directive would be completely destroyed. Conclusion. We know that God wants to strengthen our faith, so by his grace we can overcome anything that will ever come our way.
Chapter 12. Righteous art thou, O Lord, when I plead with thee. Yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Wherefore doth the way of the wicked prosper? Wherefore are all they happy that deal very treacherously? Thou hast planted them, yea, they have taken root, they grow, yea, they bring forth fruit. Thou art near in their mouth, and far from their reins. But thou, O Lord, knowest me. Thou hast seen me, and tried mine heart toward thee. Pull them out like sheep for the slaughter, and prepare them for the day of slaughter. How long shall the land mourn, and the herbs of every field wither, for the wickedness of them that dwell therein? The beasts are consumed, and the birds, because they said, He shall not see our last end. If thou hast run with the footmen, and they have wearied thee, then how canst thou contend with horses? And if in the land of peace wherein thou trustedst they wearied thee, then how wilt thou do in the swelling of Jordan? For even thy brethren and the house of thy father, even they have dealt treacherously with thee. Yea, they have called a multitude after thee. Believe them not, though they speak fair words unto thee. I have forsaken mine house, I have left mine heritage. I have given the dearly beloved of my soul into the hand of her enemies. Mine heritage is unto me as a lion in the forest. It crieth out against me, therefore have I hated it. Mine heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour. Many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion under foot. They have made my pleasant portion a desolate wilderness. They have made it desolate, and being desolate it mourneth unto me. The whole land is made desolate, because no man layeth it to heart. The spoilers are come upon all high places through the wilderness. For the sword of the Lord shall devour from the one end of the land even to the other end of the land. No flesh shall have peace. They have sown wheat, but shall reap thorns. They have put themselves to pain, but shall not profit. And they shall be ashamed of your revenues because of the fierce anger of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord against all mine evil neighbors, that touch the inheritance which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. Behold, I will pluck them out of their land, and pluck out the house of Judah from among them. And it shall come to pass after that I have plucked them out, I will return, and have compassion on them, and will bring them again every man to his heritage, and every man to his land. And it shall come to pass, if they will diligently learn the ways of my people, to swear by my name, the Lord liveth, as they taught my people to swear by Baal, then shall they be built in the midst of my people. But if they will not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation, saith the Lord.